Did you know that in this COVID-19 era, governments across the world are hiring data scientists for contact tracing? The governments are trying to stop the further spread of the virus and flatten the curve. Across industries, data science is being used to solve big problems, reducing costs, managing risks, understanding customer patterns, improving pricing, analyzing large populations. There are numerous applications. And data science has exploded over the last few years, with almost every industry putting it into practice. And that has resulted in various career options in this field. Career Warrior is happy to bring to you today an interview with a leading data scientist. Welcome to Career Warrior, an informational series on YouTube brought to you by ASPIYER. My name is Pooja Iyer, and I'm the founder and CEO of ASPIYER. We have with us today Dr. Gopinath Sundaramurthy, who is a data science lead at Kauffman Fellows. He used to be an advisory data scientist at IBM Watson Health Consulting. Thank you so much, Dr. Sundaramurthy, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So a lot of students are interested to pursue data science as a career, but they're not too sure about what the career is all about. And we would like to provide them some information on that today. So it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about your personal journey.
So in the 1990s, I'm not sure if many people remember, we had the Human Genome Project, which is, I think for my generation at least, was like the moon landing entire scenario. What this meant was, for the first time ever, the Department of Energy, along with a couple of major universities and companies, had managed to sequence the entire genome of the human body, all 6 billion base pairs of it. And then they tried understanding how the difference in one genome is making someone like effectively work better towards a treatment or make them worse towards making sure that you're not doing. So what this actually did was it laid the foundation plan for what genomics and bioinformatics is for today. It launched the entire career. And I think I was in 8th or 10th grade when I actually wrote to the Department of Energy and asked them to send me a catalog of every single document that they had. They gave me like a whole treasure trove, and it was amazing. For me, that blew my mind, where I decided that I didn't want to do medicine, but I still wanted to be very active in the life science.
Fantastic. Okay. So you started off, so you did your engineering in biotechnology. Is that where you began?
So I did biology as one of my majors when I was doing my tours, because in ISC you have the option to choose either computer science or biology. Although I was very good at computer science, I actually loved biology more, and part of it was a project. So I then wanted to make sure I continue the career in the same track. So I started up doing my biotechnology in RB College, but it kind of set the foundation for where I was going.
Yeah. So after you finished your engineering, you went on to do your master's and your PhD after that?
I wanted to experience what life science was in the industry. So I did about a year and a half to 2 year stint at a startup in Bangalore called Cellworks. Essentially, what they were trying to do was they were trying to engineer, literally use mathematical equations to model how a cell actually works. Instead of going and testing these drugs on animals or cells or anything else, they would create these, you can say, virtual cells on a machine that you could go test your different drugs to see what the effect is, thereby reducing the number of testings you actually need from an animal or number of testing you actually need before you actually come to a final product. So I worked on that for 2 years as a computational engineer there, and then decided that it's a good time to actually pursue my PhD. So I directly jumped into a PhD. I didn't even do a master's.
If you go and look at it, data science has really exploded in the last few years. Okay. Can you tell us why that's the case? I mean, what is it that data science or big data is able to solve? What are we able to address with this knowledge or information?
Yeah. So again, and I can tell you from a life science perspective, right, why it actually started mattering so much. So again, just to hark back on the example that we spoke about when the Human Genome Project came about, one of the key challenges of the Human Genome Project is everyone has like billions of base pairs of base pairs is essentially like the building blocks of life. But it also tells us that the difference between you and me is what determines whether someone is going to get, you can say, diabetes later on, someone is not. And think of it, there are about 1.6 billion people in India, and everyone has a different genome. It's 90% nearly the same, but there's a lot of 99.9% actually, but there's a lot of small variations that exist. Using that small variations, can we customize to make sure that we give treatments specifically to a given person? And that's what really defines what a personalized treatment is. How do you make it better? To give you a little more, like you can say a little more non-life science example, right? So let's just say that you are someone who's sitting and watching a channel, right? And you're trying to understand what is the next thing to watch. There's an algorithm that tells you that based on the past movies that you've watched, what is the most likely movie you're going to be recommending? And how do you go through the data? So then what happens is you have the entire catalog and you have millions of movies. If I don't serve you the right movie and you're not able to find the right movie, you're less likely to watch it.
So you're saying something like Netflix is actually using data to understand what the customers are viewing and thereby offer them the best suggestions for similar movies to watch.
Yes, and Netflix was among the earliest adopters of data science. They had something called as a Netflix challenge, if I'm correct, where they gave out $1 million in prize for someone who could come up with this algorithm and build this out, where you say, I give you a list of catalogs that happened in the past. Can you predict what movies you're most likely to recommend? And that's pretty much how the most of the field got started.
Okay, great. So can you tell us a little more about what you did at IBM Watson?
They were starting off this new initiative called IBM Watson Health, which was essentially trying to use AI and machine learning in the healthcare and the healthcare space. And it's always been a challenge because the data has always been very siloed and there's so much of data. Every single time you go to the doctor, every single clinical measurement is recorded, how many times you visited, everything is recorded into these massive databases that are there. So on a day-to-day basis, right? So we would have pharmaceutical companies coming and asking us saying, hey, we're really interested in trying to understand how a drug is doing in the market. Or another company is trying to understand what's actually happening with respect to a given treatment or a given treatment protocol. Can you give us some more insights on it? Or how many people in the world actually have a given disease and how are they generally treating it currently?
What would you think would be the key skills that are required for someone to become a data scientist?
Data science is not like a monolithic kind of a job. And that's what I said. You can definitely find a place in it, but there's various roles that exist within data science. You can just be someone who's an analyst. What a data analyst generally tends to do is he just looks at data, he modifies it in some fashion, and he just passes it on. The skills required there are nominal. You have to be very good at data visualization, and you have to have some amount of programming skills. But you don't really need to understand the domain. You don't need to know all the machine learning. And data analysts are very, very important because they do a lot of the work going into these preparations. The next one is a machine learning engineer, right? So these are the people who actually build the models. And build the models mean these are machine learning models. These are pattern recognition models, right? To do that, you have to be really good at linear algebra and understand how statistics works in a very good fashion. Plus, programming skills is a must. A machine learning engineer, traditionally, what they try doing is they try building these algorithms that everyone tends to use. Finally, you're going to have the data scientist there. He's going to be more of a master of all hats. At this point, you need to know how to code really well. You also need to know how to make sure that you get the data sets from different places, you wrangle around with the data sets to get what you need, and finally make sure that you understand the business question and give the right response to them. There's one person in between, which is becoming more and more important these days, especially if you're a computer science background, is someone called as a data engineer who understands what is the most effective way to store the data so that it can be easily retrieved and you can start building out these massive platforms as and when needed. Because understand that this data, especially in healthcare spaces, goes into the terabytes or even petabytes. And at that point, you have to effectively store them in the right fashion to make sure that they can be easily used. Otherwise, your query is going to take like 5 days to run, and it's not going to be effective. If you're looking at the top skills that goes across the range for all the jobs, I would definitely say analytical skills is a must. Programming skills is also a must. And then making sure that you have a good grasp on both linear algebra and statistics, especially linear algebra. Especially if you want to understand what's happening in the algorithms, you really need to understand how the linear algebra transformations actually happen.
What are the other areas that you think this could be applied into, or different industries? Is data science something that's applicable across industry?
The question is, which field is data science not applicable for? Like, let's say that we moved from 3G to 4G, right, in terms of internet connections. More and more devices are continuously sending data back to their original source. So let's just say that you're on Netflix. You're gathering data about how you watch, what time you watched, when did you watch it, how long did you watch these series. Or let's just say that you're wearing a watch, a smartwatch, right? Everyone's wearing a smartwatch. What these smartwatches are doing is they're gathering data about you every single instance and gathering how you're training, how well you've been training, how often are you active, how much are you active. Everyone is gathering more and more data. And with the 5G that's going to be coming up, you can actually bet the fact that every single device will start capturing data to make sure that they are more personalized to your need. Because the more data they gather, the better they are built to suit your needs. The best example would be how good your Google Home starts becoming, like your Alexa and Google Home devices. It starts understanding who you are to make sure it starts building up routines for you and give you the right results in the right time. Like with autonomous cars these days, I mean, that's like a huge place where machine learning engineers and data scientists play a massive role in terms of trying to understand how do you build these cars to navigate through roads to get you to the right location.
And I've also heard that data science actually helps companies to kind of manage risks. Could you tell me a little bit about how that bit of it works?
Insurance companies have traditionally been among the most people who've been using data for the longest time possible. The reason why it's really helpful for them is because even before you go in there, they need to know who is the population that they are trying to manage and how much of money they need to collect from people to make sure that they create a large enough pool to manage the risks for the overall population. In the US, everyone is given, these days when you sign up for insurance plans, they're given one of these connectors. Essentially what these connectors do, they plug into your car and they send data to the insurance companies on how good your driving is. Either it's like they have like different ranges in which they set, artificial ranges that they set. And based on how good your driving habits are, they drop your insurance costs. So let's just say that you're a brand new driver who's coming to the US from India. You don't want to be given a really large bill because they don't know anything about you. So you put in the small plug into your car, it sends them the driving habit and they can drop your cost by 30% if you stick to those parameters.
Do you also mean to say that everything that we're doing is being monitored at some level? What we're watching, how we're driving, where we're going, what we're viewing?
There's a fine line between how much of privacy you get versus how good is your personalization and the overall experience going to be. A lot of these companies generally tend to keep their data to, you can say, they create something called as demographics and try understanding how the demographics actually responds to a given change. And they try understanding how the population is overall broken down. And that's really useful for them. It's something that we've always done. We've always done this in our gut. Like essentially you can say people who are going to watch an action movie is going to be within 25 to 35, or let's just say 18 to 25, right? In that age group, we had a gut feeling. Now we have the data to back up to say that these are the people who generally tend to watch these kind of movies more.
Okay, awesome. And now if someone is looking to become a data scientist, what would you suggest is the best education path for them to take? Like, does everyone have to do a PhD, a master's qualification? What would be the suggested path for someone to become a data scientist?
The reason why a lot of them tend to be masters and PhD is because most masters and PhD have to go through this entire process of doing the scientific method over and over and over again on the day-to-day basis to get it kind of, finally ingrained into everything that they tend to do. And that's why this is like a lot of the, like you can say, the data scientists generally tend to be masters and PhD, but it's not something that is a must. Essentially, pick up a computer language, like always valuable skill, no matter which industry you're going to at this point. Learn how to code. Be pretty good at, like, you don't have to be like an amazing mathematical whiz, but you have to be really good at understanding what is happening in statistics and what's happening in linear algebra. Understand the basic concepts. Once you understand them and have a firm grasp on what's actually happening, you're pretty good in terms of how to approach a given problem. And finally, pick a domain. Couldn't say more in terms of picking a domain, because you will really understand why it matters to transform a data in one fashion to another, and how do you design these outcomes so that you can answer a business question. Those are the key ones. But I would definitely recommend doing a master's more, because it gives you a little more room in terms of which field you want to move into and how easy it is to move into. But you can be a data scientist even without a master's. All you need to do is be a very good critical thinker and a problem solver.
Can you tell us a little more about the scientific method? I mean, just to understand how exactly it works.
Yeah, sure. So, the best way to explain the scientific method is what the people who use it most often do, right? So let's just say that there's a patient who has diabetes, but he's experiencing some sort of stomach discomfort. So he goes to the doctor. So one of the first steps in a scientific method is asking the question. So the doctor says, what are you having? What problems are you having? So the patient says, hey, I'm having some issues with my stomach discomfort, X, Y, and Z, and everything else. So what this doctor starts doing then is he starts forming a hypothesis of what are the possible reasons that can give him stomach discomfort, knowing his past history. So he has diabetes and other conditions, his pre-existing conditions. So he says, okay, now that I kind of understand what's going on, let's gather some data that's required to make sure that we can confirm whether this is the problem that you're actually happening or not. So he then says, he gives him a list of lab tests that he has to run. Some of them may be blood works. Some of them just may be like an ultrasound or an X-ray to understand what's happening in the given area. He gathers all the data that he requires, compares them with other data that he already knows, like from his literature and everything else, to say, hey, this may be the possible issue that you're actually happening. So once he comes up with the analysis, he comes up with a basic understanding of what this happens and says, okay, this is your problem. Let's try coming up with a good solution for you, or let's come up with a good treatment plan to treat this. So he says, here's the treatment plan. You go for this, you take this treatment plan for the next 2 weeks and come back to me, and then we will run the same process again to see whether the hypothesis still holds or not. And that's the entire process. So once he comes back to him after 2 weeks, he's going to run the same battery of tests again and try understanding whether he's responding to the given treatment or not. So, and you do the same thing. The same scientific method is also used heavily in data science, where you're going from step to understanding the business question, which is the patient has a problem, to understanding the data. That is, you first start understanding what the problem is and start gathering the data for that given problem. You then model, in this case, would essentially be come up with a good treatment plan. Evaluators, once you implement the treatment plan, understand how well he's been doing and iterate if needed. That is, if you think that the dosage is not right, change the dosage, come back again. And that's pretty much how the scientific method is used both in research and in data science.
So could you please tell us about any famous personalities that you follow in the field of data science?
I'm very passionate about healthcare. So one person that I tend to follow a lot, and you can definitely catch his TED Talks, and I'll make sure that I'll send some of his links out to you guys, is a person called Daniel Kraft. He is from Stanford. I think he's a Stanford medical doctor who kind of pioneers in the next generation of, wearables or next generation of treatments.
So much, Dr. Sundaramurthy, for all your insights that you've shared with us today. I think it's really going to be helpful for our students to get a better perspective on data science as a career profession. And we really want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. It was lovely talking to you guys.
So that were some great insights from Dr. Sundaramurthy. Now, in today's high-tech world, everyone has pressing questions that must be answered by big data. And there is simply just too much information for the average person to process and use. So data scientists are trained to gather, organize, and analyze data and help people from every corner and every industry. So the top skills required to become a data scientist is that they should be analytical and be a problem solver, and also be good at mathematics, statistics, programming, computer science or computer languages, and have domain expertise also. Now, it is not necessary that you have to have an engineering degree to become a data scientist. Even if you have pure sciences or pure mathematics or statistics as your graduate level, this will also work really well as a foundation for you to pursue a career in data science. It is also encouraged to go ahead and do your master's and your PhD. Now, if you look at top companies like Google and Facebook, they only hire PhD for senior data scientist roles. So there is a huge scope in this space, and equipping yourself with the right knowledge and education is going to help take you further. So that brings us to the end of this episode. If you would like to know more about specific careers, please do leave a comment below, and we will get back to you in the following weeks with an interview from a specialist in that field. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel and keep watching Career Warrior to get fantastic insights into various career options.